Hey, welcome to Luther Strings. My name is Christopher Luther, and since we're doing this remotely, some ideas on how to maintain your instrument at home, I'd love to do it from my shop. So welcome to this magical shop space in Denver, Colorado. What we do at Luther Strings, well, it's pretty much everything. If you need something that's related to violins, violas, cellos, basses, we do it. Repairs, rentals. We have a selection process for our instruments that's unique because we're all players and we're all teachers. So we bring that into every process in our selection and our repairs and our tonal adjustments, which is kind of important. When you can play an instrument, you can tonally adjust it much better. So let's go ahead and let's get started on some very helpful tips, hopefully for you, to maintain your instrument. All right, let's talk about bridges first. When you tune the strings, generally they get pulled this way, and so the bridge gets pulled in this direction as well. This is always the direction it moves over time. So we'll get instruments here, they'll come in and the bridge is going to be very angled, and then it kind of bends into that angled form, and we can oftentimes just set it straight again. We can kind of bend it back in a process. Sometimes it won't want to bend and then you'd need to put a new bridge on. That can be avoided by straightening your bridge and keeping an eye on it. In terms of your bridge going back and forth and adjusting it in that regard, I have it very securely gripped on the table. I often do it in my lap for more grip, but this is perfectly fine. I have my wrists resting down, and then I can pinch the very top and move it any way I want. If it's crooked, I can move one side further up or back and the other side so it's a straight line as I'm looking down from the top, and both sides are even and that it's parallel with the end of the fingerboard. If it's crooked, then you'd have to hold it and pinch it from the bottom and actually move and twist the bridge in that regard. I'm pinching it from both sides. Really important to touch it from both sides. And then I feel very comfortable moving this bridge forward or back. I'm wiggling it and I'm making sure it's straight. I want it to be straight when I look down upon it, and then I also want it to be parallel with the end of the fingerboard. So that's the tilt. Now, adjusting the location of the bridge, you can loosen the strings, is sometimes easier, not all the way so you have some pressure, and then you can move the bridge side to side by holding it lower. So I hold it lower and I can push it left or right. See that? And then I'm also looking to see if the strings are centered on the fingerboard. So the E string and the G string are kind of centered within the fingerboard. Another guide in terms of its location, let's say for instance your bridge falls off, is you want the same distance from the bridge to the little notch on your F hole. So you have a notch here, that notch should point towards the middle of the bridge. The middle of the bridge foot, so that notch points over. Same thing here, and then the bridge should basically be centered so that the strings are centered on the fingerboard and that it's centered between the F holes. That's the general one. We can always adjust it from there for tonal differences, but that's kind of the standard setup. One more thing with the tilting aspect of the bridge is that your bridge is a wedge shape. So you want that wedge shape to have a right angle on the tailpiece side. So it should have a right angle, and then there's going to be a little bit of an angle on the scroll side. All right, so have a look at the peg box. I'm going to talk about stringing an instrument, but I want to point out first is that notice how the string is woven out to the peg. So the peg comes out on this side, and so we wrap the string in the same direction of the peg. This peg is coming out this way, so we put the string in the hole, and then we let the excess wrap around the peg in this direction. And then that direction, and then that direction for the A peg. So that's how it needs to look like when we're finished. Now it's true that pushing the string towards the peg box can put a little pressure on the peg box. So if this is a very old and fragile instrument with cracks in the peg box, or like a thin peg box, where the thickness here and here is very thin, then we wouldn't necessarily want to push the strings against the peg box But newer instruments, it's not an issue. I've never seen a peg box get cracked or damaged from pushing the strings to the outside, so it's touching the wall of the peg box. I'm gonna start with the G string here, and I loosen the G string, and we can pull the string out. Just let it unwind. And then there's some sort of groove and hole for the ball end. So the string is a ball end, and it's just being held in with a groove, and then we release it at the bottom of the tail piece. Putting it back on, we repeat the process. And so I put the ball back in the groove, over the bridge in its spot, and then I put it through the hole in the peg. And I want to show you that process actually up close. Alright, so I'm taking out the G peg, pull it out. This peg has been lubricated with graphite. That's fairly common, not my favorite because it's so slippery that the peg almost slips through the peg box, but it's a fine lubricant in terms of the peg operating smoothly. Remembering that the peg is coming out of the G string side, we want the string to end up coming towards the left as we wrap it. So I'll demonstrate it without the instrument. So we put the string through the hole, and it's okay to actually have some excess on the hole, excess coming through the peg. We want to wrap it around. This would be by twisting it. I'm going to wrap it around for this purpose. And then you would come over the middle. Okay? See how it's wrapped over? That will really help lock the string in place. And then you would just bring it out to the side of the peg box. And that's how it should look. Now that I've mentioned the process, you may see that the string is wrapped once or twice in the opposite direction before brought back towards the peg. For all of these instruments, you can kind of see it very clearly on the D string here. So see, there's plenty of afterlength going through the peg, and then it's wrapped opposite of the peg twice here, and then we come back towards the peg box. It's sitting against the peg box and holds the peg nice and tight in place. Extra credit, can you see that the bridge is a little forward on the G string? In the D string, the bridge is pointing a little up. On the G and D, where you look at the E string and the bridge is kind of pulled back a little bit more, I'm going to even that out. Now the bridge is looking a bit straighter. I would maybe do a little more adjusting, but that's much better in how straight the bridge is. It can be annoying with how long it takes for a string to break in. So let's say we just put a new A string on, or all the strings, and they go flat really quickly, they don't hold their tune, and it can take a week or so before they start to stabilize and don't go out of tune as quickly. But you can actually bypass almost all of that by doing a simple trick, and that is to pinch the string and then to go up and down really quickly, creating a lot of friction, and until it gets too hot in your finger where you can't do it anymore. 1 or 2 times like that releases and relaxes the nylon core of a string, and it's almost 90% there just by doing that. So you don't even have to wait a week. You cannot do it to a typical E string or a steel A string because it's solid steel. So this is for our strings that have a nylon core, which is most of our strings. However, most E strings are steel. Some A strings are steel, but most of them have a nylon core. So A and lower, that works for it, which is a really helpful tip. Let's talk about graphite. So I mentioned graphite in the use of making the pegs more slippery in the peg box or to move more smoothly. Another option would be peg dope. So it looks like a little crayon here. And this, what you can do is you can just paint it over the peg when you take the peg out, keeping in mind that the peg has 2 contact points, making sure to get those parts the most, where the peg comes in contact with the peg box. Now, other uses for graphite is when you're putting a string on and you want it to slide over the bridge more smoothly, and also the nut here. This piece of wood is actually separate, this ebony piece of wood, separate from the fingerboard, and it's called the nut. For the nut, I can, with a pencil, write in that slot, and that'll help make the string glide over the nut more smoothly. And also, it allows me to feel the actual space where the string, this little canyon, goes through, and to see if there's any bumps or anything that would wear the string down prematurely. So I put it in that spot, and then you can also put it where the string comes in contact with the bridge. The little groove down here. Soft lead can come off more quickly and work well, but I found that any lead works well. And then we're good to go. I checked the bridge. It looks good. So those are a couple areas where we can use graphite to help lubricate the string on its contact points. Are you having issues with your fine tuner twisting smoothly? If you're feeling some resistance and it's really hard to twist, you can unscrew it all the way. And then you can also put graphite on it. And I can work it all the way around, but when I screw it back in, it's actually going to work itself all the way around. And that's a nice trick to hopefully get a little bit more smoother twist in your fine tuners. Here's a fun trick. We come across instruments, we play them, we touch them, it gets oily, greasy, and dirty, especially around the neck. And the neck part, this is maple by the way, maple wood. The neck doesn't typically have varnish. And so when it gets dirty and it's not smooth, what you can do is you can take steel wool and then you can just wipe it over the neck. And just a smooth, simple process like this, going all the way around the neck. Keeping in mind where the varnish starts, not as much on the varnish. Just a few motions like that will make a really big difference in how smooth it is. It's pretty impressive. For the strings, even the fingerboard, isopropyl alcohol, 70%. These are the wipes that you would get before a shot. Easy to get a hold of. And these wipes are great for removing the rosin off the string. It just dissolves the rosin right away. Make sure that it's not dripping on the varnish. We don't want this to touch the actual wood-colored part of the instrument. It can be harsh on the varnish, but for the strings and even the fingerboard, it's a really good way. It just dissolves the rosin. And then it's alcohol, it dries very quickly as well. So I always keep these in my case. Now for a carbon fiber bow, this is also great at taking off the varnish of the stick. It won't do anything to the carbon fiber and it'll just dissolve the rosin right away. So definitely helpful for the bows if it's not a wood bow. For cleaning the body of an instrument or a wood bow, you can use a standard cleaner. And these are generally very safe to use. There's not a bad one necessarily. You'd want to just have it on like paper towel. Something white is helpful. You'd put a little bit on the paper towel and then you'd try on a spot that's out of the way, like under the chin rest or under the tailpiece, and just kind of look and see if it matches the color of the varnish. If it does, you don't want to use that cleaner. There's always like a 1% chance that it's a cleaner that takes off varnish. So you'd want to use a different cleaner if that was the case. And if you're just getting a color of dirt or grime or oil on the paper towel, then you would just keep going and you'd throw that paper towel away. New one, put cleaner on the paper towel, and you'd keep going until finally it's just white. You don't see anything coming off. And then the instrument would basically be clean. So this is a decent amount of tightness for the bow hair. Notice that the space between the stick and the hair is about the same as the stick. You can say a pencil's width apart. So if I were to put like a pencil in here, it would be about that thickness as well. Now when you loosen the stick, you want to loosen it so that the hair just sits on the stick. That's fine. So the hair, maybe I went a little too far, not a big deal, somewhere around there. So the hair is just sitting on the stick, and if it doesn't sit on the stick, if you loosen it all the way and it still has some space, you're probably due for a rehair where it's better adjusted for this climate. And then if you are trying to tighten it and it won't go above a certain point, it won't go as far as you need to go, like maybe this amount of tightness, then the hair is too loose, it's too long on the bow. And then a rehair would also fix. All right, notice this hair came out of the bow, and I need to pull it out, but I want to make sure I pull it in the opposite direction. So I'm going to pull it out in this direction. I'm not going to pull it out in this direction because that could encourage more hairs to come out with it. and kind of pulls on the wedge in the bow. So the wedge is the wood piece right here, and so I'm going to pull this in the opposite direction, like so. Now that I'm in year 3 of Luther Strings, I realize maintaining an instrument falls into 3 categories: repairs, restorations, and tonal adjustments. A repair is gluing a crack together, gluing a seam, and then a restoration is a repair but then making it look like it never happened. So we repair that spot, but then we try to make it disappear so that there's no trace at all. That's a restoration. And let's say you had a scratch on the instrument and there was some bare wood, we would want to varnish that and then smooth it out, and you may still see the scratch, but it would be protected. That would be a repair. If you wanted that scratch to disappear, that would be a restoration. A repair for that may take an hour or 2, whereas a restoration could take over 10 hours. So only if it's a very fancy instrument would you want to get a restoration on it. Otherwise, it would be in the repair category. Of course, it's up to you as the customer, but that's the difference between repairs and restorations. Tonal adjustments is dealing with aspects of the instrument that change the sound, and that's where having players and performers involved in the process can really develop proprietary ways to make the instrument sound better, and we can work on it and then assess it tonally. So that's where tonal adjustments come in, and that's the work basically with a bridge, anything like the neck where it changes the angle of the strings or the sound post. So that kind of maintenance work is tonal adjustments. I hope Western States Honors Orchestra has been a wonderful experience for you so far. I'd like to extend a warm thank you to Dr. Folks and Dr. Russell. I know this is a big undertaking, and it's just, I know it's in great hands. Thank you so much for visiting the magical shop space of Luther Strings. And if you have any questions for me, we love questions, and we're here to serve the absolute beginner to a professional performing artist. You can reach us at lutherstrings.com and let me know what I can cover in future videos. Thank you so much.